Hi, I'm Scott Cosenza in for Sarah Cowgill, along with John Clark, Dave Patterson, and Graham Noble. And this is the Conservative 5 for today, an online TV production of Liberty Nation News. Independence Day is upon us, number 249. The Declaration of Independence was passed by the Continental Congress July 4th, 1776, when our forebears decided to go to war against King George III to carve out a new nation. A brave and treasonous act that would end in death if not successful. We used to celebrate with parades, oratory, and toasts, but now the day tends to signify fireworks, picnics, and family gatherings, rather than celebrations of the founders' vision of liberty. I worry. Have Americans forgotten what the day is all about? Tell me I'm wrong, Dave.
I don't think Americans have forgotten what the 4th of July commemorates. I mean, you'll see flags and parades, and you'll see the same kinds of activities that you have every year. And besides, they're kind of happy now that they voted for Donald Trump. They put him in office, and this year's cookout for 10 guests will cost you 30 cents less than last year, and I think they're pretty happy about that. And the American Farm Bureau Federation brings that statistic to us. I think people are pretty thankful that things like inflation are on their way down, but they also know that they can be proud of the United States. I like to find, unusual aspects of Independence Day that people might not know. In fact, did you know that if John Adams had had his way, we'd be celebrating the 4th of July on the 2nd of July? Doesn't have quite the same ring, the 2nd of July. And two founding fathers, John Adams and Thomas Jefferson, died on the 4th of July, same 4th of July, 1826. Early celebrations of the 4th were really rowdy affairs with mock funerals of King George III, and there was a lot of drinking, a lot of gunfire, a lot of chaotic festivities, like a Los Angeles protest rally, or riots, is what we like to call them in Tennessee.
Dave, you don't disappoint. I thank you for all that. What about the actual founders' vision of liberty, though? Are people celebrating it, or are they just celebrating burgers and dogs?
I think they're celebrating the actual freedom that the founding fathers had in mind, and that what the early settlers fought for. I don't think there's any confusion by most Americans.
I had an internship when I was a young man, and those of us, and it was at a libertarian think tank, and all the young folks would gather around, and oftentimes just think sort of woe is me based on anything that might be in the news. There's always cause for pessimism and skepticism. But the leaders would sometimes come down and say, no, stand back and take a broad brush, that we're richer and freer, generationally than we have been. And that's the lens through which we should look at these things. Now, Graham, you've been around for a couple generations, and you've also been an immigrant to this country, so your perspective is a bit different on it. Why don't you tell us? What do you think about it?
I am sometimes saddened to think that Americans really don't appreciate what the founding fathers did, which was to make literally a life or death decision for themselves, to take on
we must all hang together, or surely we will hang separately, right?
Correct. Yeah, that's right. And the fact that they decided to literally rebel against what was at that time the world's most powerful empire is no small thing. And I personally think that a lot of Americans don't appreciate that. And unfortunately, it rather upsets me that I believe I'm pretty sure it was Benjamin Franklin who said that those who are willing to give up freedom in exchange for some temporary security deserve neither liberty nor security. And I kind of think so many Americans over the years have decided that yes, it is okay for us to trade away certain freedoms, because if we do, so the government tells us, we will be safer. And I think that's a terrible thing to do. And so, when 4th of July comes around, of course, I'm from across the pond there, so probably maybe I shouldn't be celebrating it at all. But I am more so uh, thrilled with the idea of Independence Day than I believe probably a lot of Americans are.
I think it's a typical experience of immigrants who've come to this country to look around and think of their neighbors who've been here often since birth. You don't know what you've got. As a coda to that quote about those who give up liberty to gain temporary security will lose both. I like to add and deserve neither. And they'll actually live with neither. They won't get the security and they won't get the liberty. John Clark and I had a conversation, I think it was yesterday actually, about meat inflation. So he may have something else to say about Dave's inflation comment. But what do you say about the notion? Are we in fine fiddle? Are we in crisis? Where are we on the spectrum, John, of Americans? Which we all depend on. If our neighbors don't celebrate liberty and hold it up as an important value, we're all sunk, right?
Well, I think that is kind of what we're all kind of discussing here, which is that a nation divided against itself cannot stand. As to the beef prices, they are up significantly, but they are not up as much as gasoline prices are down. And this is a holiday where people travel a great deal. And in response to Dave's comment, actually, I found a recent poll that just very recent here in 2025 that suggested that 22% of Americans said that they weren't feeling as patriotic this year. 11% said that they feel more patriotic this year. So that shows a slight imbalance, which is actually also on certain demographic planes. For Democrats, they're a little less celebratory. And young people do not enjoy this or favor this holiday as much as those over the age of 65, according to polls. But it's interesting what Graham pointed out because, and I lived in the UK for years, and the UK is in horrible trouble right now. And as the recent concert in Glastonbury showed, a lot of young British people also have contempt for their own culture. And so Dave was spouting off some birthdays. There's another birthday today. Actually, he was 4th of July dates. He was actually with obituaries. Mine is Calvin Coolidge from here in Vermont, who was born on 4th of July. And he noticed in a speech at the 150th anniversary of this country that without the value system, the spiritual priorities that Americans have always put forward in their Constitution and other documents, and in their willingness to risk their lives for that thing we call liberty, that we would lose it. And I think that, when you ask whether people are just into celebrating their hot dogs and hamburgers and their beer versus their liberties, I think, we live in a very highly consumptive society, and soft times make soft men. And so we indeed do need to bring people together. It's scary that people are so divided. If we can't come together on 4th of July, I don't know when we will. And there's a lot of good news out there on the economy. And so despite those who don't like good news right now, jobs reports up, wages are up, inflation overall is tamed. So there's a lot to celebrate this year.
I like to say Calvin Coolidge is America's most underrated president.
No, Graham, that's Gerald R. Ford, for my money.
Now, gentlemen, let's not disagree. It's 4th of July. Common cause. They're both great men.
Ford was, for anybody who doesn't know, a veto machine. He pretty much did nothing except for veto the acts of Congress when he was a president. And boy, if there's any guidance for any other president out there, what better could they do than just simply veto every act that the Congress undertakes?
Spoken like a true libertarian.
Yeah, thank you for that. All right. Any grilling tips for the masses before we close down the segment?
That would take some understanding of how to cook, wouldn't it? Ooh.
Dave, a true military man, just gets out the bottle of Tabasco and dumps it on whatever he's got in front of him, and
Meals ready to eat.
Meals ready to eat.
And enjoys it. All right, well, folks, celebrate today. Enjoy those fireworks, parties, hot dogs, and cheeseburgers on the grill. But in the midst of the celebration, let's recall the reason for the day off: self-governance and a constitutional republic where individual rights reign supreme. That's it for our Conservative 5/4 panel today. Check out our other C5 shows and segments on your favorite video platform: YouTube, Vimeo, Rumble. We're on them all. Liberty Nation News also has its own Roku channel where you can see all of our TV productions. Liberty Nation does not endorse candidates, campaigns, or legislation, and this presentation is no endorsement. I'm your host, Scott Cosenza, in for Sarah Cowgill. Thanks for joining us today for the latest news and commentary. Your choice for free thinking, free speech. LibertyNation.com.